And action.
Hey, I'm Leah, and I was the location sound recordist and post-sound mixer across the Love Gun series.
Doing two at a time, mate.
We'll do it.
So one of the challenges was shooting with 2 camera units. That was particularly challenging for certain spots where camera shooting, wide on Lease, they're in one on Ed, and 1 minute they're up in each other's faces and then they're just running, like splitting apart, and trying to capture that with a boom was pretty difficult, and I think we ended up running a few wild lines trying to sort of get what they're yelling and bantering at each other.
Plus, you were a dick! And you were a dick!
One of the other challenging scenes was the final confrontation between Lisa and Ed, the actors. Such a beautiful scene, and they were doing so good, but where we were shooting was like a sport kind of recreation place, and it was just that time in the afternoon where the games were starting, so you got like ref whistles and kids yelling "Rah!" in the background.
The reality is the whole pie.
It was pretty faint, but it was definitely in there. Speaking of it, flames. One of my favorite things we did, and I'm really glad we did it early on because it was such a great library and resource to have throughout the post sort of aspect of the show, was what we call loop group, which is when you just take a bunch of extras or actors or anyone who's willing in this case and get them to sort of recreate moments or just additional voices and recordings to add in the episodes. And that went from, background voices at Supernova.
That's the outfit I always pick for her again.
She's not even British though. She got Dave.
Through to like zombies and mummies and... The mummies in particular were like really good, really useful. There was different types of mummies. There were sort of people doing like a sort of low gurgling. And there was these little high-pitched energetic ones. And they really, really added something to that episode. Yeah, no matter how many times I watch the final scene of Ep 6, particularly when I was editing through it, like the first few times I watched it, I would always tear up. I'm a bit of a sympathetic crier, and watching Ed play Elliot, and there's a line where he chokes up a little bit and he's got tears in his eyes, and I would always choke up and start crying and just be like, oh, Ed, stop. So yeah, it was beautiful. It was really, really amazing.
Yeah. I'm really glad you did.
Me too.
Dealing with all the sort of external sounds that we didn't want in those recordings, I was absolutely determined to get those out and leave those recordings as pure as possible. There are some, really good noise reduction software out there, but they can be quite rough on the recordings. But I really wanted to keep that scene as pure as possible.
Open your eyes!
So I was really, really careful with it. I spent days just pulling out these whistles and these little sounds, cars and planes, but keeping the raw energy of that scene in the recording. Sounds great.